Good afternoon. Got a couple of shares to go here. Okay. Now, this is the continuation of the lecture from last week. There are going to be at least one more lecture, including this one. And then next Tuesday or next Thursday, depending on how far we get in the lectures, there will be a quiz. Now, the quiz this next time is going to be the same format, except there will be at least one half of the questions that are from these lectures. They will be taken specifically from these lectures, so you need to pay a significant attention to these lectures and make sure that you keep them and go back and study them. Now, the last time we made it through a discussion of idealism and realism. And you need to make sure that you go back and look at those lectures. Idealism basically is ontological theory that reality lays somewhere within the idea. In Plato's type of idealism, reality lies in an external, a non-physical, non-mental realm that he called ide, the theory of forms. In Kant's quite different, and you need to understand that difference. And for Kant, the reality itself lies basically within our conceptual apparatus, perception. That is ultimately real. But there's also in Kant one way that we check up on that. We check up on that by checking in with each other, by establishing the fact that we all have the same relatively correct perception, or we agree with each other in our what we see, indicates that at least we are all having the same idea. Now, that doesn't mean that the idea is correct. We do not theoretically know for certain that it is correct, but it is certainly statistically correct. If we are being misled, we are all being misled in like manner. Now, the opposite of idealism is realism. We said last time that Plato was an idealist, his student Aristotle was a realist. Realism says that in some form, reality lies in the object itself. So for Aristotle, the form of the thing is the very essence of what is contained in the object itself. And that resonates with the human mind because the human mind is tuned to nature. It is a part of nature and it is tuned to nature. So we thereby know that our idea of the thing is, in truth, the thing itself. Now, you need to listen to the last lecture because I go into more detail than I do here. Idealism has one major problem, and that is, what is the reality of the thought? Where does the thought come from? Hence the difference between Kant and Plato. realism has two problems: the reality of the object itself and whether that is really real, and the reality of the thought of the object. So that's a brief introduction to what we talked about the last time. Now we have to go into Kant because studying Kant, we've got to return to the basic discussion that we had on ontology and epistemology, because Kant is much more of a traditional philosopher than Mill. Um, he's mathematically trained. He is a physicist. He's a scientist. He was an academic philosopher, and as we recall, Mill was not. But there's an intermediary between Mill and Kant, and actually David Hume um, was earlier. Well, yeah, it was relatively the same time as Kant. David Hume, Scottish philosopher. Uh, David Hume says that there are two sources of knowledge, what he claimed knowledge. Um, and that is limited because, as we'll learn, um, Hume was a skeptic. As a matter of fact, not only just a plain skeptic, but what we sometimes call a solipsist. He denies that there is knowledge at all. We don't know anything, according to Hume. At least that's the way some people read it. But for Hume, there are two ways that we claim knowledge, at least: matters of fact and relations of ideas. Now, matters of fact are things like it is raining, and right now at my house it is raining. So if I say it is raining and we look out the window, we both see that it is raining. That's a matter of fact. It's right or wrong. Uh, but from that, we can extrapolate nothing for the future. So I don't know whether it will be raining tomorrow from the fact that it is raining today. As a matter of fact, for Hume, I don't even know that there will be a tomorrow. We might say, well, there's always been yesterday, so there will be tomorrow, but we don't know that at all for Hume. We simply cannot know that. We cannot derive a future from a past at all. We don't know that at all. That is simply a claim and nothing more. Right? Uh, that's the first way of knowing, probably the way that we all think of what it means to know. The second is relations of ideas. Now, relations of ideas for Hume give us no information about the world. Relations of ideas um, are things like A equals a thing is identical to itself. Now, Kant looks at this, and in a minute we'll talk about what really Kant has to think about Hume. But Kant had been used to interpreting things in the same format as Aristotle and St. Thomas and Descartes. Remember, his teachers were disciples of Descartes. And Descartes had an idea which he called clear and distinct ideas. Clear and distinct ideas were things that presented themselves like a triangle has three sides. Um, that's by definition. So things that are true by definition for Descartes, as well as matters of logical necessity, like a thing is identical to itself, were what he called clear and distinct ideas. Now that goes all the way back to St. Thomas and Aristotle. There's a little bit of difference. Aristotle had said, we know things by intuitionis. It's the Latin from where we get our word intuition. Now, the Greek and the Latin word for intuition is a little bit different, has a little more nuanced meaning than our English word intuition. This is a basic inclination to know something. We talked about this in Aristotelian form the last time by talking about his understanding of form as being the kernel, the very core of something that excited our knowledge about that. And if you remember my example about seeing you coming across the parking lot and getting clearer and more correct ideas. First of all, I see you simply as a person, then as a male or a female or whatever. And then later as you. But the very first kernel that we see in Aristotle is what he would call intuitionis. All right. Now, Kant understands, I think, that at least on one level, Hume had destroyed this. He thought, I don't think he did, but I mean, I don't think really this was true, but I think Kant thought that this forever put to rest the rationalist and the realist approach to the definition of ontology and epistemology as the thing being grounded in the object and the form of that thing, or clear and distinct ideas. Both of these are, at least on one level, rationalist principles. And I think Kant, I would say incorrectly, but at least he maintains that this was destroyed by David Hume. But he goes on to say, what happens then if Hume is correct? Well, first of all, then we would not know. One of the things that we know for sure, and that is that we can check up with each other and find out whether something is at least statistically true. If 9 out of 10 of us agree, we at least know that there is on one level what we would call, now it's not objective in the terms of absolute objectivity, but it is objective in the sense that it is statistically proven. So Kant renames matters of fact and relations of ideas. The first he calls synthetic a posteriori. Now, synthetic is a matter of creation. It doesn't exist on its own. It is changed and seen. That's what he calls a matter of fact. So the fact that it's raining today may or may not be true. So this is plastic. It changes from observation to observation. So that's what he means by synthetic, and a posteriori means from inside experience. So this is plastic inexperience. All right. So that's what he names matters of fact. Now, what he renames relations of ideas are analytic a priori. Analytic means that it's logically true, it's true by definition. Um, if something is synthetic a priori, I mean, if something is analytic a priori, it's logically true. But he adds a second category here that Hume would not add, the synthetic a priori, which means that it's necessary for thinking or for existence. Now, what he means about necessary for thinking or existence, he means things like God, morality, that sort of thing. These are all things that we have in common, that we speak about. And for Kant, even atheists talk about God willing, or so everybody's got a concept of this, not well worked out necessarily, but everybody has a concept of God, whether they believe in God or not. So God is a necessary way of explaining things, um, according to Kant. Now, see, we're getting back into metaphysics and epistemology here. Anytime we deal adequately with these topics, anytime we clearly ask um, how it is that we know something or think something or say something, we have to go back into epistemology and metaphysics. This was the failure of Bentham and Mill, and to some degree Hobbes, and even I would think Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who we haven't mentioned, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke are two people that appropriated, took, or stole, however way you look at that, Hobbes' notion um, of the state as being necessary in some way for our peaceful life with each other. Um, so I've said here that Kant distinguishes between two closely related concepts: the epistemological, that you remember, that's knowledge, right? Don't forget that. The epistemological related a priori, a posteriori distinction. When you see those two terms, that is where epistemology comes in. And the semantic or the truth related analytic synthetic distinction, so that's where the metaphysics comes in. So we have to know both metaphysics, analytic, synthetic, and epistemological, a priori, a posteriori, before we know the truth or falsity of a proposition. So let's look at these and define them as we see them here. So a proposition is a priori if it can be known or can be justified independently of experience. Now, that would mean things like A equals A, logical things, or a triangle has three sides. And in order to know this, according to Kant, we don't need to consult the triangle. We don't need to look at the triangle. We know these things a priori. We know these things metaphysically. Okay? Now, that's an a priori proposition. Proposition is a posteriori if it can be justified only on the basis of experience. That would be things like the example I give here. The triangle I drew is red. We need to have a perception of some particular, not universal, object, other means of experience. In other words, testimony that we talked about. That's the way we check up always on a posteriori uh, propositions, on knowledge, by checking in with each other. So if I say, the triangle I drew is red. That's a red triangle, by the way, not an A. The triangle I drew is red. We look, all eyes look upon what I've drawn and we say, yep, that's a red triangle. Unless we've got one person in class, would we were in class, that says, nah, that's not a red triangle. At which point we abjure with that person. And if push comes to shove, we bring in the guys with the little white straitjacket. So we've got to have a particular instance of something that we can say yep or nope. And in this case, a posteriori, it would be yep. Okay. Now, a proposition is analytic if it is true based on mere interrelations of its concepts. And that can mean things like logical necessity or something as mundane as bachelors are unmarried. We know the definition of bachelor is an unmarried male. So these two things are interrelated with each other out of necessity. It's very based on the very meaning of the concept bachelor. Okay, that's so it can be mathematical type necessity, or it can be semantic type necessity. Okay. Oh, a proposition is synthetic if it is made true only by something outside its mere concepts, i.e., by the objects contained in the concept. Now, that would be something like bachelors are jovial. So this is not true based on the meaning of bachelor. Just because you are a bachelor doesn't mean that you are a happy person, but it's made true or false by whether the person referred to by this concept is jovial or morose. Okay. So synthetic a priori judgments are God, morality, and the immortality of the soul. These things are necessary in order to converse about reality itself. So if we are going to converse about morality, if we are going to have any kind of meaningful semantic exchange with each other, Kant says these are necessary. God, morality, and the immortality of the soul. Now, we have no experience of not experiencing. That we simply don't know what it means to not uh, think and feel and do. Even in our sleep, we dream. So images keep occurring to us even in our sleep. We cannot get away from that. We have no experience that would allow us to say that this is going to stop. So the argument by any definition of either analytic or synthetic, a priori or a posteriori, is that experience itself will continue and not stop. So the soul is immortal by the very definition of our discussion of language itself. Now, this doesn't mean heaven or anything like that, I don't think. Kant was a good Lutheran, but I don't think he was that bad of a Lutheran. Uh, he certainly believed in some sort of afterlife, and that our experience itself indicated that there would be such an afterlife and that we would continue to think. As to what that means, he doesn't give us any idea. He says we can have no idea of that. The only thing that we can have an idea about is that experience doesn't stop. Experience is a universal. Um, uh, Plato had given a similar kind of argument in the Phaedo, where Socrates is about to die, and he says that I am convinced that nothing can happen to a good man in this life or in any future life to come. Ever sleep. That's a wonderful thing, he says. Who would not exchange the terrors of the day for a peaceful night's sleep? So even if death is what we call death, it's not something to be feared, according to Socrates. On the other hand, if afterlife is heaven, uh, then that's certainly something to be looked forward to, because there we can talk to Achilles and Athena and all of the perfect gods and the better, best people that have gone before us. So no matter what happens, um, Socrates says, death is something to be looked forward to. Um, I think I'm going to stop there, um, because this is a lot of material to cover. And as I've said, I'm going to expect you to be conversant with this material in a way that I didn't necessarily expect you to be conversant with it on the first exam. Now, let me say about the exam, I've got at least one more. I'll have to go in and take a look at here. Um, so I don't know how far I'll get with this, but at least one more, which means is going to come out more than likely Thursday of next week. I had initially said something about Tuesday, maybe, but I'm not too positive about that now. It's more than likely going to be Thursday. At which point it would be due the next Thursday. So please keep that in mind. Spread the word about this, um, and and hopefully we will be able to get this out of the way pretty soon. So I got a couple of people on here. If you've got any questions that you would like, or clarification that you would like on this, unmute yourself and ask away. Okay, then I'm going to sign off. And now everybody knows, please remember that what was true at the beginning of class is still true and will be true until the very ending. Maybe even after everything is finished, you can still email me for your hard fought questions on philosophy and ethics. But if you have any difficulties, if there's any personal clarification that you need, shoot me an email and I will set up a person to person Zoom. So, to all of you out there who may have questions and don't want to go public with them, um, then shoot me an email and we'll have a private conversation. Okay, I'm going to end then, and I hope everybody has a good weekend. And I will talk to you on Monday or Tuesday. This video will be up on YouTube later this afternoon as soon as it finishes compiling in Zoom and I download it to YouTube. So blessings on you, and I hope things are going well. And give me an email if you have any problems. See you later.